What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, creator of Chaos here, and we are back with episode 107 of the video game therapy series. The other day, somebody sent me something that got me thinking about the Native Americans for whatever reason. And it's kind of come up always. It's like just what I hear when somebody mentions that is like, oh, we stole their land, which I guess just to preface the whole thing, guilty on all charges in terms of, as they would say, the white man or the Europeans or Spaniards that came in and massacred all the Indians or Native Americans, I suppose. I'll be using those interchangeably. But not saying they're not guilty of whatever they did, but stealing their land or like taking ownership over their land is an interesting concept in that context for me, only because, again, this is just based on my anthropological knowledge, the Indians had very little concept of ownership at all, much less like land ownership. That was very much a like a European thing. So the idea that we like stole their land, like they wouldn't have considered them even owning it. Which is not to say that we were right to steal it, of course, but it was just a completely foreign, different way of living entirely. So they kind of lived off the land, in harmony with the land, and we kind of pillage land for our benefit. And I'm just speaking collectively about, I guess, the white man, as they would say. But it's just interesting to think of it in the context of like, we even framed like the atrocity that we did in our context, in the context of like us, we own land and we took what they owned. It's like they didn't even think of it in that way, that they like owned the land. They were I don't know, I suppose denizens of the land, and they lived off of it, but they're very sacred towards even the things that they killed and what they used in the land. It was very much a relationship, I guess, based in some kind of sacredness, whereas we kind of have a very transactional view on the land, which is emblematic, I suppose, of our more transactional relationships and basis now, whereas I think even like family relationships or romantic relationships used to have maybe much more like kind of sacred, this is good, whereas now it's like, well, my family's always been mean to me, therefore like I should just throw them out, which I realize that there's a fine line here between like I guess just viewing your family or your significant other or your best friend as like this transactional relationship. I was like, I've always been there for him much more than he's been there for me. It's like it's like 5-1, or like they're keeping tabs on how often they look out for their friend versus their friend looks out for me, which I just think is kind of is just a fucked up way to look at relationships and life in general, is to view them in this overly transactional manner. Not to say that we should go back and you should just, even if you're, step uncles, whatever is raping you or whatever, you should just stay there. But obviously there's some nuance to this, but I do think it's not important that things all be equal, or you even get like the benefit, because there's even relationships, even like most people's mothers, if she viewed it transaction, like this stupid baby has been suckling from me for fucking 20 years, what a waste, and but they don't run away, because there's this almost this obligation, this kind of spiritual obligation, perhaps even this kind of concept of, vague ownership, in the sense that the mother kind of owns the child, which is weird. But I don't think is necessarily the way that the Indians viewed that either, that they they owned their children. Their children were just kind of, were a blessing. It was all very, very, very much like, kind of, wishy-washy in terms of how they revered the land and the animals that they killed, and they kind of gave back in this as much as they took, or not as much as they took, but they gave back enough that they took, and as such that the land was kind of in this balance. It wasn't like they were deforesting the whole areas. They would, or destroying entire deer populations and hunting them for gluttony or whatever, which came along with a lot of agriculture, but they certainly didn't have this concept of like, here's where your land ends and mine begins. I think there was terrain that was familiar to them, but it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't as black and white as just they owned anything. It's just funny when we say took their land, but like they didn't think of themselves as owning that. In the same way, they didn't really think of anything as owning much. Not that they didn't own much, because they kind of had these possessions, but even possessions itself is still kind of a foreign concept to a foraging tribe, or at least most of them, based off of what we know, is they weren't like fixated on what they owned or who owned what. It was this fiercely egalitarian relationship where it wasn't about like, well, what have you done for me that has earned you this, meat? It was like, most times, most people come home with no meat. So when you come home with meat, you share it. And then when you don't come home, you can just take the meats you have. And it's like, not to say it's like we should go back to this like kind of, but I think we've lost a lot of this egalitarian spirit that I think is innate in humans, because we forget it's not like they were just like dumb people. They were actually the more primal kind of animal version of us. And we've had to beat out all the instincts that society's kind of ingrained in us, because that's where we start. We start kind of as this animal, not to call them savages in that sense, but we are animals. We're still animals now. We're just animals that, have trying to beat the beast out of us, which is kind of a strange, I don't know, a strange thing to fight, which is, again, no wonder that so many of us now kind of have these problems adjusting. I wouldn't say that it's like, on some level, I am kind of anti, I guess, large industrial society. Not that I have a choice, but it's just I'm not well adjusted to this. It's not a natural state of existing to sit at a desk, much less. But even like have the concept of money and like equal exchange and everything. And while it might be like fair, it's not necessarily like good. Whereas I think viewed in the same light, I've made this argument before about money, where money might be like fair, but it's not like good. So where it's like a good thing to like just do something nice for somebody for no reason. It's not fair. But you're like, well, that's fine. Like you can do things that aren't, but like you kind of forego fairness in the sense for being good. So while it might have been good for you to always share your meat, it certainly wasn't ever fair, especially if you were a really good hunter and you were like the best of the tribe. And of course, there's this whole like eugenics Darwin argument where over time the best hunters would have been selected. But I think people also kind of overinflate the speed at which that really happened. Like it wasn't like every generation, like half the people who were the quote unquote worst hunters by any small margin were just thrown off a bridge. It wasn't like that. This happened over like thousands and thousands of years, or many, many different generations of life and death, such that there were very, very small differences. And this happened over, again, a very, very long time horizon. Something completely different, completely foreign to us. Whereas I think now biologically there's so little difference between people of two different generations. Whereas socially there's kind of vast differences where people are, now the internet kind of came around this last generation. Microprocessing, computer, these are all vastly new things that we can't evolve to this that quickly. I think our biology and biology in general evolution's a very, very slow process. Very, very slow, like way slower than we might think it might be. To where it's like, well, we can adjust. We're adaptable creatures. We can kind of adjust to a new environment quickly. It's like, well, I mean, in some ways, yeah, sure, but not without sacrificing something. It's not like we're biologically adapted to sit at a desk, we're just not, or to eat the foods that we have. And it might, maybe over the course of several thousand years, where, our bodies kind of change to adjust to a grain-based, Frosted Flakes diet. But right now it's not. And Frosted Flakes is terrible. And it's, you shouldn't really be eating that. So, but I think it's stupid. People try to use the evolution argument to say like, well, you mean, we just kind of adjust. It's like, that doesn't happen certainly not over like within one lifetime. So it's not even like I can fault old people for, getting computer viruses just because it's kind of out of their frame of reference. But even as people that grew up with the internet kind of understand it, the technologies that come next will be another degree of foreign, and we're going to be increasingly ill adapted to our environment. So then it kind of lends it to two futures after that. It's like, okay, well, one, then humans just kind of go extinct and we replace ourselves with something that can survive cycles of evolution a lot faster. So, robots and artificial intelligence, or whatever you might call that, even though I've kind of pushed back on this idea of artificial intelligence at all, because, what is that? What does it mean really? Which is, again, might sound just like a pithy philosophical question, but I think it's actually integral to it being real at all, like defining what intelligence. I think you can't especially we're speaking about existential risk to a whole species. We shouldn't be, cavalier about how we define artificial intelligence, whatever that means. Either way, it's either that or increasingly humans are, again, just kind of we're out of range, and we're going to have more and more problems, I guess, as animalistic creatures to adapt to this environment that is so far out of our kind of biological purview. So one kind of response would be to then first understand like what, if we speak about, I guess, societal progress, where has that benefited and harmed the, human animal, as if we're going to call us that, and then where to kind of stop doing stuff and where to where to leave stuff alone and where to continue searching. So, on one level, I guess to make one single argument around this area, I think socially we're moving backwards in terms of being able, being social. We are social creatures biologically through and through, and even technologists that kind of all want to live in the metaverse still get that. They still kind of, we can socialize, and the whole point, it's even part of even just the whole point of being alive is to socialize and be have a group of people that you're around and you're important. A community of some kind is integral to the survival of our species and just like the happiness. I guess we could technically survive in solitary confinement, but I don't think anyone would argue that's a better life to have. I think about the chickens that are, or the cows that are essentially in solitary confinement. I'm not saying that they're necessarily social animals. I don't know the exact anthropological history of a chicken or a cow, but I imagine it's not in a 4x4 cage or something. Imagine it's grazing and there's other chickens that they poke at or something, and there's some fighting or something. I don't know what goes on with inside of chicken coops, but the point is, just as they weren't designed to sit in that cage, and we're making them, I guess too bad for being a dumb species. We should also think about our kind of presets, and also keeping in mind that evolution is very, very slow. So it's not like we can just say, "Oh, evolution will keep up." It won't. Evolution is too slow to keep up with that. And most people's argument, I suppose, if you're the technologist, is just, well, then let's just let AI do everything. And to that I say, what's the point? Why? You're going to let AI look at the clouds and write poetry and enjoy it? It's then what are you doing all this for? I think at some point it goes from this intellectual curiosity, which is fine. I think it's a fair thing to be curious about and to kind of explore intellectually, but it's not a thing to kind of purposefully instinct our species just because we're we have control over it. It's not like it's this inevitability. I think people tend to view technology as just inevitable. Well, it's inevitably it's going to happen, but that's not an excuse for doing it, right? Because somebody has to do it, and I'm making the argument that it's inevitable that somebody does it at some point. It might as well be me. I think it's just kind of a cop-out argument, and it's an argument that is rooted in this biological will to power kind of thing, where it's not even about our species surviving. It's this internal power struggle, which I also think is not a biological human thing, but is more so a social thing. I don't think, I said, even in the early tribes, these humans were fiercely egalitarian. Selfishness was not a gene that they wanted. They didn't want people who were selfish, who took all the meat for themselves. And there was even people that lived with them that studied them, and they would always, even a young person who would maybe got lucky or was good at hunting and caught them, the elders would always say his meat is worthless because it would keep his pride at bay, such that he didn't start thinking that he could start taking over the village and shit like that. And even something like that. And they would use humor to, again, kind of keep the ego in check. But now that it's too much ego is seen as a good thing, and you're just a capitalist, and you're here to you're a founder. It's going to change the world. I think that used as this will to power excuse is what kind of people hide behind in saying, well, these technologies inevitably are going to create gambling apps that get people addicted, and it's we'll just need a new app for them to not get addicted. It's that. I think that's not an answer. That's not a fair retort. It's just that because somebody else is a bad human and does shit things, I should be that person instead. And it's no, I'm good. You can trust me. I'm good. It's inevitably you're just becoming the enemy that you maybe sought to destroy. And I don't think it all happens all at once. I don't think I think it's easy to kind of view what people do, especially once you've kind of ironed out a philosophy of any kind. It's easy to view what people do as like, this person's just like an evil person, whereas like, well, I'm a good person. These are good people. This person's evil. I don't think it happens that, like they don't roll out of bed and they go, what more evil shit can I do today? They're like, rolling around in their lair or whatever. I think it's a lot more subtle. I think a lot of it's more, kind of self-brainwashing into thinking like, I think people that even do kind of evil shit truly think what they're doing is good, but they just kind of lack what I'll even say, just humility to recognize that fact. Like I've said, the truly only existential threat to humanity is arrogance. And I stand by that because I don't think these people are rolling out of bed doing evil stuff and, crawling out of their dungeon and saying, who can I exploit for whatever capital or labor today or whatever. I think it's mostly, it happens a little bit at a time, and it's because of an unchecked ego, more or less, that the people get into these, neurotic patterns that cause them to be these hyper capitalists and viewing humans as these indispensable objects of nothing, which I think is really the crux of it. Is it's how they view humans, and even they view themselves in this way too, because it's just this perverted philosophy, and because of their like quote unquote external success that you can't really deny, whether it's financial or social. Oh, I went to a party with Kanye or whatever their success may be, they use that as justification for their fucked up philosophy. Whereas I think like in the tribal days, there'd be elders that would speak low of their meat, be like, your meat is worthless. And it wasn't because their meat was actually worthless. It's because you don't want somebody with this huge ego in this tribe, because it fucks up the whole dynamic. Because somebody thinking they're better than everybody, then, well, I don't have to hunt, you guys hunt today, because, and it's not like that everyone, it was like this survival. Everyone like, it sucked that much. I think there was a lot more leisure in these kinds of people think. And not that it was an easy life. It certainly was hard. But it certainly wasn't like, they weren't going into office 80 hours a week or whatever. It's a different kind of difficult, and one that I think we're much like well suited for, right? I think there's certain things like difficult things that we're pretty good at doing, but other difficult things that is like damn near impossible to do, for that long. Like, so I don't know, we're working on Excel sheets. I suppose even if you're somebody that likes, doing that stuff, maybe that's not that difficult for you, but you can imagine like if you're some fat person that loves doing Excel, fine, running. Imagine that running is probably harder for you. Even though biologically probably we should be a lot better at running than using Excel. We've kind of, that's been beaten out of us socially. And then I think we developed compensatory patterns to deal with these problems. Maybe it's, a Diet Coke addiction, or, I don't even know what people take all day to get through their shit, but they're certainly not well adjusted or not built to do that. In the same way we might, would be built to run and stuff. And it's not like it's hard, but it's not like it's a different kind of hard. It's a hard that is hard because we're not built to do it. Not because it's easy for a computer even, that's because we built a computer to do it, but humans themselves, I think it's important in terms of what we want to look at, what the future holds. What are we built for? What are we good? That's why I think looking at the anthropology of it is at the very least it's interesting, but at the most it's integral to understanding what the fuck we're supposed to be doing, with our technologies. First of all, what are humans meant to be doing? I think you'd be a fool to try and argue that we're meant to be, working on Excel or writing Python even. And not that I do that. I there's even some enjoyment people get out of that, but it's not biologically what we're built to do. And we haven't, it will take centuries for us to evolve in any kind of capacity to be able to want to do that. And not before we've created computers that automate all that away. So again, what's really do we really want to wait for our evolution to catch up, and give us 10 fingers to type on each hand so that we're really good at, again, mastering Python or Excel or whatever? Or it probably seems like a job better suited for computers to do, our classical computers that we've created. So then, okay, that makes sense. We probably shouldn't be spec into something like that, or at least use that as like our roadmap for the future. But then, so where does it leave us? Again, I think we're biologically driven to have some kind of physical, use our bodies in some way. I think people tend to view it as like this hobby of exercise. Exercise is not a hobby. It was not. It's kind of a necessary. It was always a necessary part of our environment up until a couple hundred years ago to be physically capable to move around. And it's only up until recently that it really hasn't been that useful. But we're still kind of built for that. Maybe maybe you're a little bit crappier than other people's builds, but nonetheless, you're still, more or less a monkey that's designed for this environment to move around, to run, jump, throw things. Maybe not the level of like our most supreme athletes, but certainly that's what your body's built to do. It's not like you're built with an extra processor to, an extra NPU engine or something. Nobody's built that way. No one's built with that in. They're all built with arms and legs and a heart and all these things that are built to move around the body. So it's part of the thing. And then the other thing that we are built in some ways to do is for social creatures. We have these we have tools for listening and speaking. And we also have, again, our minds that can create things to listen and speak about. So I do think there's a huge social kind of chunk of what we're kind of built to do. We're kind of built to be social creatures, built to socialize, and built to socialize too, I think, in the physical world. I think there's something innately wrong with socializing outside of, in the metaverse or whatever. I just don't ever see that being something that, again, we're not evolved for it, and so it will forever be a kind of going against the grain. We're kind of fighting, we're battling our biology. Not to say that we can't battle our biology in some ways, which we obviously have to do that anyway because of agriculture. We have to make vaccines to kind of prevent a lot of the diseases that come from eating certain, like the one types of food that we've grown all over, and the world be fucked up. So as we've kind of fucked around with the world a little bit, we have to battle our biology a little bit, but it's worth asking, and worth entertaining at least, to what extent are we really capable of battling all of our, is it possible to battle all of our biology to every nth degree, number of limbs, like all of that? I think at a certain point you're going to be fighting, the juice won't be worth won't be worth the squeeze, I guess, to use a idiom or whatever for it. Because at some point we won't be able to really battle the biology any longer, and we'll go nuts. I think I'd argue that on some level we're already kind of seeing that in people that have increasingly unstable mentalities with existing in the world. And it's not their fault really. It's just that we're on more and more fronts each and every day. We're finding more and more ways to put ourselves out of our biological and historical context in which we flourished, and even happiness. There were stories of when, like in Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson's time, when they would still meet these like remote tribes. None of them were like depressed and sad. Like they all kind of, they were happy. There's one tribe that I absolutely thought was hilarious. They just laughed at everything. Like they would laugh. They laugh if they caught too much fish. They laughed if they caught no fish. They laughed if like one of their houses, their little huts got blown over in the rain, they would laugh. Like they would laugh about literally everything, which, sign me up for that, please. I would love to live on that village where it's just, everything is just funny. And it wasn't like that, just because they were so used to like, everything. It wasn't like that they have these anxieties. Like they were so well adjusted. They knew that whatever, nature would throw at them, they'd be able to figure something out. It's not like they knew how to build the hut, so they just built another one. Like they knew how to survive even if they didn't catch fish that day. There's other things that they could eat. And so it wasn't like they were like constantly concerned with like, I think that's part of why it's difficult for us now, is that, again, historically, we kind of knew our environment really well, and that allowed us to curb a lot of our anxieties about like what's going to happen. Like what if, what if my tent blew over or my hut blew over or whatever, like, oh no, what's going to happen? Whereas now I think I was like, dude, I don't know what's going to happen. The economy, like we're worried about things that, our ancestors, would have laughed at because they knew what to do. It was their environment. They lived, they understood that. Right. And to a certain extent we can understand, how societies change, but on some level we don't really know how the world changes. No one can see even a month into the future in terms of a stock market or, any kind of, social trend. It's not like there's no amount of forecasting that, helps us really. Or is not that helps us, but is always accurate. And so that leaves us with a ton of anxieties about the state of future affairs. We're not really comfortable. So it's hard for us to even, try as we might to laugh about our anxieties on things if we don't catch fish one day, so like metaphorically. It's hard for us to know that we're going to be fine because we don't know if we're going to be fine. Maybe we won't, because this isn't the world that we're built for. But again, I don't need to be too cynical on the society at large. I still think there's a lot that, I don't know, there's certainly upside to it. But I would, I struggle to believe that it's all, that the savage life was that abhorrent in terms of its, and how it treated its inhabitants. I think it's a lot more bearable than people might give it credit for. But anyway, I am lost. So anyway, I'll move on to something else here. I guess the last note on this I'll give on this only because it's I saw this earlier. It was relevant to me. It kind of stuck out. I was buying a notebook in just a regular grocery store. And I was looking at I wanted just a plain one, just without anything on it, and which I think is a very normal thing to ask for. But unfortunately, they have all these ones that if you're not creative enough or don't have, they came with a title for you. But the concerning part to me was just that a lot of the titles just seem to presume that basically you weren't okay, more or less. It's like one of them was like I don't know if it was like a drinking journal or something, but it was like, here's all the reasons I drink. And then like, that's a title. It's like it's like printed on to the head of the journal. I'm like, what is the assumption? So the assumption is that you're a miserable sack of shit and you hate your life and you're buying this journal so you can write, reasons why you drink every day, like why you're a functioning alcoholic. What the hell is wrong with, like, why, it's not even like that exists. Cause that's like one thing. I realized, fine, like, maybe no one's buying it, and that's why it's on the shelf. But the fact that it like got through all the way up through all of the chains and everything, and now it's like on a shelf in a big box realtor, and I'm now looking at a journal that has a title of that basically equates to, ha ha ha, you're a functioning alcoholic and you hate your life. Let's write a book, write in our journal about it. So it's like the funniest thing is like there's probably a lot of good reasons, and societal reasons perhaps why you're miserable. And then, of course, the answer is now to sell you a book that you get to write in and write about your problems. I'm sure there's also a pen that comes with it and says like, I don't know, the agent of explaining your drunkenness to your boss or something. But anyway, I saw that and I was just disgusted kind of for a few hours about the state of the world. I was also thinking about apologies, like saying sorry for people, and this is just more of a kind of a social tangent, but I think it is, at least I've been trying to make a more concerted effort to this, is to not just, it's always easy to just say sorry for something and to just immediately apologize, even if it's like not your fault. It's like somebody tells you, oh, it rained, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, but it's like I realize it's like, I'm sorry that happened to you. But I think that there's, I think problems that can arise if you're overly like if you want apologies to have power, right? And especially when you apologize about something that you're truly sorry for, I guess besides saying like, I'm really sorry, I'm truly sorry, you want your apologies to have weight. So I think the tendency to apologize, profusely all the time over everything, especially things that just weren't your fault or that you had nothing to do with, is somewhat problematic, I think. So I've been making a more concerted effort to not just like immediately knee-jerk say I'm sorry, because when I want to say I'm sorry, when I want to apologize for something, I want it to be like, oh wow, he apologized, not just like, oh yeah, he just said I'm sorry. Whereas I think those are different things. I think it's too easy now to just kind of blow past apologies as if they're meaningless. But apologies, I think, need to have weight. Otherwise, you're kind of down to just using more and more adjectives that preface your apology for it to have weight. Like, I'm truly unapologetically terribly sorry. Like, I'm terribly sorry. Now, like, I imagine the weight of I'm sorry, maybe, on when you said it for the 10th time, it now has to be I'm terribly sorry, and that only works for another couple hundred sorries before you're kind of out. You have to move on to the next adjective. I'm excruciatingly sorry. Like at some point it's just stop apologizing for stuff and use them more sparingly. So I think I'm going to try to more sparingly use sorry, or to apologize at least not to apologize less, because there's certainly things that, I can say it's too bad that happened to you, which isn't, is different than saying like, I'm sorry. But I want to be careful about when I apologize for something, because it kind of insinuates it was a mistake that I made. And when I do make a mistake and I want to fess up to it, I want that to have weight. So it's not like I'm trying to be less apologetic. It's more so I want my apologies to be significant, not just these empty, like, well, who cares if he said he's sorry? He says about everything, which I think that's kind of the wrong way to view, that. So I don't know. I thought about just sparingly saying sorry, but just wanted something else here. Yeah, let's see here. I just, speaking of something else that is another kind of social botherance of mine, but my most favorite kind of human attitude, I'll say, is amusement or humor. I think humor is probably in my S tier in terms of ways to exist and responses to have to the human condition, whatever that might happen to you throughout the day. Humor is what I love. People that respond to fears, horrors, loves, happiness, sadness, all of that through humor. I think that's great. So thinking about the other side of this, in my least favorite, I guess, human attitudes, is helplessness. Helplessness is far and away my least favorite. People that, it's not even just like people, it's just like there's people that aren't helpless people, but I think we all kind of know people that are truly just all and throughout, they're consistently helpless, and it's part of like they're even. And I don't mean to make this like into a victim oppressor thing where like they're the victim and they want to be seen as a victim. But I think in general, like an attitude of helplessness, by definition never helps you. Because, somebody that claims helplessness and says, oh, I can't do it, will never be capable of helping themselves anyway. So they always require help. Whereas I think it should just always be like, it should never be like the first thing you jump on. But I think if there ever be a time to state helplessness, it should be like at the very, very end. And it should almost be like so fatal in the way that it is put forth that it's not even like worth, being sad or asking for more help. Because it's like if you're just like, well, someone's like, hey, can you just move the sun 10 feet closer? You're just like, dude, no, I can't do that. Like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I don't know what to tell you. I obviously shouldn't apologize for that because it's not what kind of request is that? But no less, just be like very like, well, this is obviously I can't do this. Whereas it's like, hey, can you like tie your shoe? You're like, oh, I can't. It's like, you obviously can. I know you can tie your fucking shoe. There's nothing stopping you. It's like you're the only person in the way. And now that you've declared to yourself and the world that you are incapable of tying your shoe, now you're not. And now someone else is like, stop doing, like, I hate that frustrates me to no end. The people that just like, well, I just can't. Oh, it's just I'm not able. It's like, you can. You literally, like, I wouldn't, like, it should be last resort that you ever say I can't. Not to be like all, Gary Vanderchuck or whatever and act like you can do everything, but there should at least be some like, well, let me try this. Or like, I tried, but I failed. Like, I tried, but I failed is totally fine. That's not helplessness. But like, without trying and then immediately declaring, well, I can't. Oh, well, I'm not gonna be able to do that. It's like, then fail and prove it to me. Show me that you can't do it. Unless we're talking about you jumping on, like if I say, oh, I bet you can't fly over this building. You're like, no, I just can't. Like, that would obviously be something you wouldn't have to prove. But like, if it's something, a lot of times it's stuff that's so unbelievably trivial that like, prove me you can. Like, it's not, I think declaring helplessness is such a silly attitude to have and is annoying for me, especially when it's stuff that is like very easy and simple. It's like, well, maybe I was like, oh, someone's like, oh, I want to lose weight. It's like, all right, well, don't even worry about, eating all vegetables or going keto or something. Just like write down what you're eating. That's all. Just get a piece of paper or a little journal. Get one of those journals that say, this is why I eat, whatever. Do that. I don't care. Doesn't matter. I don't care how you want to do this. Just start writing down what you're eating every day, and you can eat whatever you want, but write it down. And there, that is a kind of a step one. First off, figure out what the fuck you're eating, how many calories you're eating, whatever. And it's like, well, I'm just not gonna be able to do that. You are able to do that. There is nothing. Unless you have both your arms are amputated and you're unable to see, speak, or you don't have an excuse for that. These are normal. And then first of all, how'd you even get fat in the first place if you can't see, you have no arms and no legs? I don't understand how you even got to the state what are they putting in your feeding tube? How are you black? Are you blackmailing them into giving you, McDonald's through your feeding tube? That's crazy. Either way, I just was thinking about my least favorite, of course, after thinking about how much I appreciate people that deal with their lives in humorous ways, I was thinking about the most frustrating, and helplessness was at the top of my list, just because I just hate that attitude where it's like, I just can't do it. Not to say that there's times where you can't, because there's times where you fail and like, well, I failed that time. I couldn't do it that time. I don't think I can't do it. It's just I didn't do it that time. But this just like auto, like, oh, I just can't. Like, you can. I know you can. It's like we're not asking for anything impossible. Like it's not often that like exacerbated exhale, I can't, is not met with like, is not, the answer to, can you do something that's relatively simple and does not require, an infinite number of human faculties. So anyway, let's see here. Yeah, so I wrote a little blog on this earlier, and it kind of relates to my adoration of the funny, I suppose. But I talked about like kind of the three ways that you could respond to. I just called it kind of the existential question, and really this could just mean any question that you deem truly existential. It doesn't matter. It doesn't like. A very simple one would be like, what's the meaning of life? And then people could be like, well, the life itself is like, we define meaning as some way, and then like a number of meaning is a number of dollars. I don't care how you would define it. Either way, when you've finally reached through Socratic means or whatever, when you ask enough questions and you boil it down, whether you're asking about a physics particle or whatever, I don't care whatever you deem as the truly existential question, a question that is metaphysical in nature to you, that usurps any number of your religions or whatever you have. That existential question or questions, maybe you have lots. I probably do, but regardless, what do you do with that question? I think and this is kind of can guide your what you do with your life and your time and your human endeavors, whatever. The first, response, or the first thing you could do in response to this is just to ignore the question. Say, well, that's a silly question. I refuse to entertain this question. And then you can just go on kind of doing whatever you want, living your life as if the question is of no importance to you, which, is what it is. And it doesn't matter. It's not, I'm not have to answer the question. Maybe that can be part of your philosophy too, but I think that is too philosophical in terms of ignoring the question. Ignoring the question is like truly focusing. Existential questions now become, what am I eating for dinner? These are like, that's on the same kind of level of importance and triviality. It's like you don't assign any truly metaphysical weight to this question, which is again one way to live. And I'd argue most people kind of live in that bubble where they refuse to. These questions are kind of pointless. Well, I'm more worried about my 401k right now. I don't care about dinner, or the meaning of life. These are all potato to them. That's one kind of attitude, I suppose, and perhaps the prevailing one. The next is to, in response to the metaphysical question, to think about it and sorry, I'm in lava right now, is to ponder it and then take it seriously. I guess take it as like a challenge and something you must unearth to understand. And ultimately it's kind of its own little Ouroboros of a story, because you don't ever really reach. And even if you find like an answer that's satisfactory to you, that is, I guess more of a result of how you're able to convince yourself of this satisfactory answer than the answer truly being existentially satisfactory. Otherwise, philosophers would no longer be puzzled with, they'd all have landed on something. I think there's, certain camps that have landed on certain buckets of kind of answers that are satisfactory enough, like the absurd is kind of an answer. It's like, well, there's, nihilism is another kind of sort of answer. And the people, bucketed and landed on these answers and satisfactory enough to quell, their curiosity, but not the curiosity of other people who still have answers. They still go on and kind of take these questions seriously and treat them, as they are, which are questions of an existential nature. Which is again kind of is a fine way to live. And the last way is to, consider the existential questions, but I just say kind of not take them serious. And what I mean by that is not to ignore them at all. I think you have to appreciate their importance and the meanings, and even the inability of yourself to answer it as kind of this, as part of the question in some ways. But to not, but to kind of to laugh at it, to not take it seriously. And maybe humor is one way to not take it seriously, but I think there's other ways of not taking it seriously, like different art, music, poetry, sure. Really any way you find creatively to, kind of take the knife out of the existential question's hand, so to speak, is a fine way of not taking life's questions seriously. So I guess in framing it this way, I don't know where I saw this or where exactly I got exposed to this, but that was kind of the framing that I came up with. And then I learned about Kierkegaard's kind of 3 stages of life. And in his case, his is more of like a temporal thing throughout life, whereas mine is just, I guess, 3 kind of buckets of, answering the existential question. It's kind of independent of any time horizon, so to speak. His was more of like, you go through these 3 stages in your life, and like some people only stay in one, some people kind of move from one to the other. And they're similar in nature to mine, which is why I thought it was interesting. And I'm certainly not, there's no point in credit being passed along. It doesn't make any sense. This is where I heard it. But anyway, he has the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious as these like 3 stages. The aesthetic, as you would imagine, is like the purely material. So this is like, pursuit of material pleasure, this rejection of boredom, and this like subjective individual goods are paramount to to anything beyond that. So it's like this very what I would call a very materialist worldview, which is kind of where you begin, I think, especially as and I guess temporally his framing of it does kind of make sense. So it's not like I'm discounting his and saying mine's better. His also makes a lot of sense temporally, because I think a lot of people start at this stage where it's, you just, as you're kind of adopting and before you're able to craft your own philosophies, you have to learn and listen and take advice and, not question as many things. But once you're able, I think it's kind of your duty even to start answering or start asking difficult questions of your authority and whoever. The next is the ethical. So I guess the prevailing like actions of the aesthetic stage of life is like to embrace and to numb. Whereas the ethical would be to kind of cry and debate. So these are more like concessions or commitments to social ethical principles, kind of an embrace of a more objective, more collective good, or pursuit of a greater good of some kind. Which again, I think as anybody that, as the true philosophers knows, all kind of boils down back into its subjective roots, but in a way I would argue becomes less serious. And not necessarily it's less serious, but it's you're not ignoring the question, but you're not letting it kind of kill you. You're not crying and debating over the question. You're more so just musing it and knowing that it is bested you and it will best you. And that third stage is this religious stage where you're kind of praying, and then I say you pray and then you just laugh because you're kind of leaping. There's this leap of faith into this acknowledgement where it's not the existential question, so to speak. Doesn't like win. There's no winning or losing per se, but it's not one that is meant to be taken too seriously. And so I just thought that was an interesting like parallel between I guess musings that I had at one point or the other about these I guess just how people live or how to live, I suppose, and a famous philosopher of Kierkegaard's framing, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, I wrote a blog on it too, which just a few hundred words about that. But yeah, still fascinating to see it in that light. All right, let me move on to something else here. Let's see here. Yeah, so this is another interesting thing, not really related to that, but just kind of a general premise. I guess acceptance, or a better kind of wishy-washy word to use with it in this case would be like love. But love of oneself, again, or acceptance if you'd prefer that. Love of oneself just to the way you are, or towards some kind of future image that you hope for yourself. Because I think there's a problem in there's obviously a problem in being totally okay with where you are right now, especially if you if you're battling some actual physical or mental ailments, being like totally okay with that and just accepting yourself. And it's one thing to accept, I suppose, but it's another to like, and even to love, but another to like kind of relax ambition in some ways, which I think truly is like the ultimate form of this love, is to kind of achieve this tranquility where you're not in pursuit of anything necessarily. Whereas I think like you can still accept yourself and want to be better. I'm not saying these have to exist, mutually exclusive of one another, but there's certainly some there's some trade-off between being okay with who you are currently in whatever state that might be, in whatever measurements whatever subjective qualifications you're making to that, versus who you would want to be over time. And so maybe it's more about trying to love the kind of immutable, or like learning what the immutable characteristics about you and your persona and psyche and body are, and then and loving those, but maybe allowing I'll say ambition to still kind of battle the parts of you that you are are immutable, or sorry, are mutable. So I don't know. It's hard to kind of frame those in ways that are less, that are more concrete and less abstract. But I'd also argue that the hardest part about any of that is to know and accept what are the immutable characteristics of me. So, for example, like I am kind of a cynical person. I'm not going to claim that I'm some overt optimist. If you've probably listened to any more than 5 minutes of this, you've heard me complain about something somewhere that I have nothing to do with. And it's not even that like I enjoy the act of complaining. It's more so that seems to be my inclination, is to view things through as society would call it, a cynical lens. Now, obviously, I have my own opinions on what I would consider. I think there's kind of this degree of honesty that we have to have. And if you consider that cynical, then to hell with you. I don't care what you think. Anyway, I like that has been something I've noticed that I guess through hell and high water, I'm unable to completely revoke out of my persona. It's not like and maybe there's other things I haven't tried. Maybe there's this, I don't know, vitamin B8 or something that I'm deficient in, that somehow is going to remove my cynicism, which I doubt. But I've begun to accept that as a characteristic of me. I'm by nature a more cynical person. Even the same thing as like what I find funny. There's certain, again, with my sense of humor, tends to be on the darker side of things. I tend to find, kind of dark humor funny. And I would argue that this is more so than not an immutable characteristic about my sense of humor. And I think there's a certain finality that I have to accept with that, in the sense that I shouldn't be like, well, I need to have a more mainstream sense of humor. I need to accept, be more, optimistic in what I think is funny, or any of that. So, and I think that's the difficult part to really, to nail down, when to like love and accept yourself, so to speak, and when to wish that you were different in some ways. And I think a mismatch between those, it's like I could love like the creative abilities of myself, but not enjoy like the way my body looks is one thing. Because I know like the way my body looks, it is a mutable characteristic. Not to say that everyone needs to have body dysmorphia. You can reach a point where you're like, okay, this is pretty damn good for my genetics, and that should be it. But if you're overweight, or you're out of shape, or there's some problem, or you eat like shit, there's not like, you're like, well, I can't change that about me. Like, obviously you can. So that's part of why I think ambition should stay in place with something like that. But I think loving the way that you are should be only your immutable characteristics. So for example, even like habits that you might have. So for example, if you were somebody that, let's say every day you get home when you watch a movie, say it's the same movie, who cares? You watch a movie every day when you get home. I'm not a big movie watcher, but some people are. This, again, I would argue, is a trivially mutable characteristic about you. If you really wanted to be somebody, and if you again observed that this was behavior that you thought was viceful, and you wanted to change, this is a wholly mutable characteristic. Therefore, it's kind of okay not to hate yourself about this, but it's okay not to love yourself as for the movie watcher, because that's not, you can change that about yourself. I would think I wouldn't be out of bounds to argue that you could just stop watching movies when you get home. That being said, like your height or something, you should need to accept at the very least, if not kind of, I guess, love, or however you can rationalize that, how tall you are, because that's kind of you can't really change that once you're after a certain age. I guess if you're still at the age, you should just keep eating. But if your height's kind of reached its peak, there should be no reason to hate yourself, over your height. It's like, I think this is very trivially something that is immutable. You shouldn't have to change that. So it gets more difficult when you speak of like personality characteristics. So for example, I think I've also determined that my sense of humor is in some ways immutable. I can't find, like, I either find it funny or I don't. And there's not I guess try as I might to, like, I can fake laugh at stuff. And maybe there's some amount of like kind of laugh shock therapy where I have to go watch 40 hours of Jimmy Fallon or something and laugh. But that's not funny to me at all. Like, I can watch thousands and thousands of hours, those dumbass daily Tonight shows or whatever, and not laugh at a single joke that they write. And part of it is just like, well, you could just blame like my cynicism or my whatever. But I think on some level, my sense of humor in that, again, in that context, is immutable. I can't change that as a characteristic about myself. Therefore, I need to accept and understand that I don't find, Jimmy Fallon funny. I'm sorry, I don't. He'll never be funny to me under any circumstance. It's just not fucking funny. So I think I've had to accept that as like, I love that about the way that I am. I don't think he's funny. Whereas other things, I think, I could change. I could, I don't watch movies that often, but I guess I could play Minecraft less, maybe, if that would be a goal of mine. But I really only play when I do these, so it's not really something I would like to change about myself. But this is more in the context of like, I want to change something about myself. What should that be? Can I? All those questions. Whereas I don't actually have any ambition to actually play less Minecraft. In fact, I think I should play more, because I think I need some kind of, I enjoy doing these as an outlet. I think this is an important kind of creative outlet for me. So it's worth it to me to play more Minecraft. So anyway, I'll wrap it up there. Thanks for watching. Peace out.